We're ready to go.
Pledge of allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight's meeting is being recorded. With that being said, Representative Frank Muller from Hanson's not able to hear, but he is on Zoom. So with that being said, by advice of our council, all votes will be roll call votes because when somebody's on Zoom. So right now, we have no agenda adjustments. Is there anybody in the audience that has a public comment? Seeing none. Okay, I'll ask for a motion to accept the minutes listed as on the agenda. So
I'll second.
motion Situate, second by Whitman. All those in favor? English, Frank? Hanson? Okay, well, with that being said,
Put him
still,
last.
we'll put him last. Whitman?
Yes.
Norwell?
Yes.
Cohasset?
Yes.
Situate?
Situate, yes.
Hanover?
Hanover, yes.
Abington?
Abington, yes.
And Rockland is a yes. Frank? Hello, Frank?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, now we can. Frank, we just take the vote for the minutes of the previous minutes.
Hanson, yes.
Okay, thank you. That is a unanimous vote. Okay, right now we call Ms. Baldner for Student of the Month.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to introduce February 2023 Student of the Month, cosmetology senior, Madison Greer. Madison plans to pursue a career as an esthetician after graduation. Madison was initially nominated by her technology and computing teacher, Ms. Gerley, who says that she's always eager to learn and has excellent participation in class. She's very responsible, and consistently puts forth her best effort to succeed. I and her fellow students appreciate her positive attitude and consideration for others. There are many other educators who would like to celebrate Madison too. Her guidance counselor, Mr. Madera, describes her as intelligent, bold, and an advocate for her classmates. She is very trustworthy, supportive to all those around her, and he particularly appreciates her often no-nonsense attitude. History teacher, four-year and four-year fan of Madison says that she is an outstanding student who consistently exceeds expectations on assignments. She's an extremely hard worker and helpful to classmates who regularly enhances class discussion and collaborative activities. With her insight and knowledge, Maddie is very caring, passionate, and driven. I have no doubt she will be successful in whatever she does. Her shop and teacher, Ms. Darling, commends Maddie as a leader both in the shop and out of the classroom. She always gives her very best efforts on assignments, guests, and projects. She's a champion of the underdog, always ready to take a stand for social justice and equality. Congratulations, Madison. Now I have questions, so let's switch spots. I'm going to step aside. Can you tell us a little bit about how your program has shaped your life?
Well, I've always thought that the power to make people feel good through their appearance, even if it's something as small as
call on Ms. Wagner again to do staff spotlight.
I know.
English teacher Tony Borgia is here tonight to share a snapshot of her experience in Poland last summer. She was elected from a deep pool of applicants to teach English in Ukraine to refugees. Before she steps to the podium to say a few words, I'd like to add that she also recently worked with a team to develop a curriculum for identifying bias that she will be presenting at a national conference in Washington, D.C. in July. Tony is a tireless and talented educator, and I turn over the podium to her.
So, last June 17th, AFT sent an application. I sent it out to the e-board, nobody seemed interested. I said, oh, I like to travel. However, I'd like to bring my daughter with me. So June 19th, they said, yes, we'll accept you and your daughter. I go, "Sure, no problems. So we ended up going to Poland. It was 30 hours to get there. Very remote. We were about 20 miles from the border of Ukraine. I had an opportunity. I was the only teacher in New England that was asked to go. I was able to work with 14 other teachers, 6 other countries. We worked with our classroom, especially had Ukrainian and Polish students. That was sort of the point of the camp for the 3 weeks. I was with them for 16 days. I taught for 10 English, but we were able to travel on both our 3 weekends in different cities from Poland. It was one of the most spectacular places I've ever been to. It's absolutely beautiful. Can't recommend it enough. The people are just really friendly, and they don't smile. It's Polish festivity, but Americans are very smiling. But other than that, the food was really great. It was just what an experience. I've been so gifted of being able to travel with overseas trips for years and years at this school. I did 17 countries in 7 years. However, we always do very fancy things. You know, we go to the Eiffel Tower, we go to the Versailles. We've always done very touristy things. This was the first time I've ever lived with people, and they knew all of the American teachers were coming. They knew all about us. However, they totally fell in love with us. 3 weeks. So it was pretty spectacular. And the kids were amazing. It was just a great experience. So that was it.
Thank you, Tony. Anybody from the committee have any questions?
I don't know any Polish.
That was my question. You learn Polish?
My daughter learned like 20 words. I learned 0.
How was the food?
Excellent, really good. Potato with everything.
Yeah.
Breakfast, lunch, dinner, everything has potato in it.
Where will you go next?
Okay, I don't know. That's a good question.
I think that's an excellent segue for us to consider an opportunity to take Ms. Borgia's lead and send a group overseas, potentially in the next school year. But I'm thinking perhaps on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony. Student advisory, Joe Ortolini.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
So for the Skills USA District Competition will be on March 3rd. 139 students from South Florida will be participating in it, including me. So it'll be the first time doing it. Very interesting to see how it goes. Also, Deanna Newell won a silver medal for the National InDesign. Skills USA Scholarship Chapter also won a $500 grant for the district meeting also. And the comedy show that Skills hosted at Venus was a huge success. It completely sold out. I wasn't able to go, but I heard it went really well. So that's for athletics. Ethan Mayo won MIAA state sectionals. He goes on the states this weekend. He's wrestling for the 182 weight class. Left-handed. And the girls basketball team is 15-3, and they won the league championship. They are league champions. The student council side, the students bought 92 keychain bears and 93 chocolate bars and are being handed out to students this week by student council. They also come with a note that you're able to write on and send to the person with the keychain bear or chocolate bar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, great job. Turn to reports, Coffin, Jim.
Thank you, Chairman. The treasurer's report, this month, we throw some of the athletic teams on the cover. Girls basketball, the senior wrestlers, including Joe, yeah, nice picture there. The swim team, which doesn't get talked about much, but I guess they had a fantastic year as well. Page one has all the cash balances and everything that's in the system. Again, a little over $5 million in all the banks. And again, comparing it to prior years, we have to remember that we did make a big purchase next door that took a chunk of money out of our savings accounts and so forth. And we just did the billing for the third quarter for all of the accounts. That money is determined into the accounts in February. At the bottom, our OPEB account is at $916,000. Page 2 is our revenue for the month. Again, all of our towns have paid all their first 2 installments of their assessments, so there's nothing that came in January. And we have some miscellaneous income along with our regular Chapter 78 that popped in total about $313,000 came in. And the final page is the expenditures. Again, for the month, a little over $1 million was expended, and the largest part of that is $700,000 for salaries and wages. Everything else is on track. Not a lot of major discrepancies going on. There's a couple budget transfers here to be dealt with. But overall, Janine and Pam are going through all the data. We're midway point of the year. We got staff still purchasing items for their shops. We'll start looking at the numbers as we get closer to April and see where we are for in the end of the year numbers and so forth. So overall, we're reaching.
Entertain a motion to accept the monthly report. Motion, Hanover, second, Situate. Roll call vote. Frank Hanson,
Yes.
Noel,
Yes.
Cohasset,
Yes.
Situate, yes.
Abington, yes.
And Rockland is a yes. That is a warrants.
Warrants, 14, 14A, 14B, 15, 15A, 15B, and 15C, owing $1,508,750.22. I'll make that motion to accept.
Whitman, motion. Second, and Cohasset. Roll call vote, Frank Hanson,
Hanson, yes.
Whitman,
Yes.
Noel,
Yes.
Cohasset,
Yes.
Situate, yes. Hanover,
Yes.
Abington,
Abington, yes.
and Rockland is a yes. That is a vote. Thank you. Budget transfers. Sorry.
This year we have, this month we have 3 budget transfers we're requesting. We're adding some funds into the leased equipment line item, $3,150. Based out of some savings in the workers' comp insurance line item. Custodial supplies, purchasing more than the original budget number. We had $12,404 number into that transfer. Again, from the savings in the workers' comp insurance. And then medical supplies, for $3,000. And that's from some savings in the transportation line item. So that's pretty much the requested transfers this month.
Motion Situate to approve the transfers. Second, Hanover. We'll call vote again. Frank Hanson,
Hanson, yes.
Yes.
Noel,
Yes.
Cohasset,
Yes.
Situate, yes. Noel, Hanover.
Yes. Abington, yes.
Yes. Rockland is a yes. That is a vote. Thank you.
Almost.
He's close enough. Jim,
Same
any
state.
other updates, Jim?
Not this month.
Very good. The chairman has nothing right now to report. Subcommittee, there's nothing on subcommittees. Superintendent Connector.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very briefly tonight, a few updates for you regarding the MSBA process. This is something that you would have all seen firsthand, but just as a summary and also just to state here at this meeting. We recently had a joint meeting of our school building committee and our school committee to talk with representatives from our project management firm, Brookfield. The update specifically is that we have submitted to the MSBA the draft request for services document to hire a design firm. The MSBA will likely take to the end of the month. They will give some feedback. Again, this is a boilerplate document. We don't anticipate too many changes. The trajectory for 2023 is that we would probably spend from now through June going through the process of bringing a design team on board. Later in the agenda, we'll appoint a school committee member to the designer selection panel. That's a 13-member board that consists mostly of MSBA representatives, as well as representatives from the school. And that process will take us into the spring, April, May, June. So by June, we should have completed what MSBA calls Module 2. We'll have formed our project team. And then the second half of 2023 will be focused on the design. Visioning sessions with members of our school community to get input on what our needs are, so that we should be at the tail end, near the end of this calendar year, with the first instances of models that we can say, if you did this, it might cost you around that. And it's not anything that would be super precise, but it would begin to fill that very important void that we have of what could we afford and what might it look like. That will then take us into 2024, where the design process gets narrowed down. The school building committee has the authority to narrow down the options, and eventually in 2024, an option would go in front of the MSBA. Our project manager is going to be working on some potential timeline options, which I think will be very informative to see as a visual, so that we can all go to our calendars to 2028 and figure out when the ribbon cutting is going to be for something. But for now, we're just going to celebrate each small milestone along the way. So we're in the process of forming the project team, and the school committee, as well as the school building committee, took action on increasing our feasibility budget. So we have a $2 million feasibility budget, which will encompass our design costs, our OPM costs, and again, we will receive 55.16% reimbursement. So we're in a good position, and we were just admitted less than a year ago. It's good to be at this point, and I thank you for your continued support throughout this process. The next item is an update on the regional agreement and district expansion. A lot of meetings and outreach, and this will continue for the next few months. Jack and I were at the Situate Select Board, where we presented not only a brief presentation on the fiscal 24 budget, but also talked about the regional agreement amendments and went over a handful of substantive changes that we're proposing. And my expectation is that I would be talking to members of all of your communities, perhaps both FinCom Advisory and Select Board, over the next couple of months. And we have the advisory tomorrow night, and I'm on Zoom right after this meeting with the Cohasset Advisory Board to do the same thing. So again, I appreciate the town's quick response, knowing we're bringing them a complicated article, but we did something similar in 2018, and that was after revising a regional agreement that hadn't been amended since 1983. So we blew a lot of that dust off, but we still ended up with a bunch of grammatical and formatting changes, but there were only 5 or 6 substantive changes, Scrivener's, etc. In addition to that, I also had a Zoom this week with nearly all of your town administrators to talk about this, which was a very good use of time, having everybody on the same call to walk through the changes with them, to raise their awareness and to offer our cooperation with speaking to anyone in your communities as we approach town meeting. Once again, they're a very important part of the process. As Jack said, we'll be with Situate Advisory tomorrow and Cohasset Select Board on February 28th. And I expect that in March we have a date in Norwell, March 16th, I believe, and we'll talk to their advisory board about the budget. A quick, that'll help me, it'll help me transition to the next item, but I also want to mention that I also made a presentation at the invitation of the Pembroke School Committee a little over a week ago, where they invited me down in order to explain a little bit about our school and the process that's involved when a town wants to explore potentially approaching the district about joining. It was a great conversation. The school committee members asked a lot of questions. And although I had to leave to go to the meeting with Jack in Situate, they later voted to support a warrant article at their Springtown meeting to form a regional planning committee. So they understand that that is the first, that's step 0. You have to form that committee. And again, what I offered, one comment that I offered on my own was, in potentially admitting a new town, the town of Marshfield, that the committee would probably need to see where that dust settles, but that they're not opposed to having conversations. If they're going to form a regional planning committee and communicate with us, then we can see where the conversation goes. But for now, they understand this is not an HOV lane process by any means, especially when we are still in the midst of working on the admission of a new member town. It was a good conversation nonetheless. And I'm actually touring a group of Pembroke parents who want to see the inside of the school after school tomorrow. Dan?
Have you heard back from Powell? Are they maybe reconsidering?
No communication with Hull at all.
Also, because when we finally have a new school, we're gonna have to really look at towns that want to come here, right? Marshall, now Pembroke, right? I mean, Hingham, right? May want to be, yeah, I mean, they don't have vocational areas, vocational schools to go to, but yet there are kids that want to come to a vocational school, get an education. That's the trend in our days. I'm just thinking that when we look at MSBA, we have to look at, we may build a school that's bigger with a lot more students than we need, a lot more space than we need with the students we have, but future needs. I mean, we have Marshfield and Pembroke knocking at the door of Hull decides that, well, maybe we should get in because maybe there won't be any more room for us. And, in other towns, Hingham, in other areas. So that's going to be very interesting.
It is, Dan, and part of this committee's determinations and decisions in the school building committee, again, over the next 6 months or more, is we have to come up with a design that's the best, most modern school that our towns can afford.
Right.
And ultimately where that number is, it could be, as we know the numbers, it could be as high as 805 students. If it were just our 8 towns, it could be as high as 975. We're going to have to look at not only building the schoolhouse itself, but we also have to be able to project, honestly, to ourselves, the increased operating costs.
Right.
We see a lot of great new construction going on, some great looking buildings around the Commonwealth, but very few construction projects are taking an existing school population and projecting that it's going to increase by 1/3. There are some new buildings where the enrollment, we built the school back in the 70s for this much, and now we're going to build something new. It's going to be great, and it's going to last a half a century, but it's going to be for a smaller population. So we are bucking that trend. We'll know so much more by the end of this calendar year to be able to inform. And then this school committee, perhaps with the 9th member at the end of the table, will have to look at cost savings by bringing on another community, lowering the debt costs of the communities who signed on to the project, and capacity. I think that's ultimately, we would not be able to project that right now.
Out-of-district students do not pay for part of the building project.
There is regulatory language that allows the commissioner to assign a separate capital increment for non-resident students. Has that happened? I believe that did happen with the Minuteman project. They had, as you might recall, following it, they had a very large district with 16 towns. They revised their regional agreement. Half the towns got out. They built a smaller school, and then they had a waiting list. So there may have been a capital increment when that school was being built. But so in any sense, Dan, if we did have non-resident students and we did have a significant capital project, it's possible. But as it stands now, we know where the non-resident trend is going. It's going to disappear.
And my last question to you is, when we had the Zoom meeting with administrators about regional agreement. Did they come back with any questions?
It was
Concerns?
I would say when we got to the part of the agreement that Desi asked us to put in about the default debt method, we talked about the various parts of the statute, chapter 71, 16D, 16N. D is you pass a debt authorization here, it goes to each town meeting. If any one town meeting says no, the matter dies. 16N is the process where it goes from here to a district-wide ballot. So we were actually starting to talk about, and it's good, my emphasis is we want to talk early and often. I've also reached out to a couple of town clerks in order to learn more about what it is to run a local election. Very complicated. But these are the people who are very important in this process. We don't want to be talking about things 6 months in advance. We need to be a year plus in advance. I'd rather over communicate, tell them something that isn't urgent, and then loop back to it. So to answer your question, I don't think there were any substantive questions on Marshfield's terms and conditions. I went through that certainly, but I wanted to point out 5 areas that were not merely grammatical or cosmetic changes to the agreement. It was well worth everyone's time. Excellent. I much appreciate their time. But
Also on that, I think you mentioned that CMR, that doesn't allow us to take non-district students now unless we have every student in our district.
correct.
seated. And that's something else that we have to initiate with them mostly. And it's a big push because I read that Commonwealth News every day. Is a mess of superintendents trying to grow vocational education, but that they are so that
What Bob's referring to is when the state decided 4 years ago at their level to change regulations, no longer allowing it to be a local decision to admit non-resident students. That's why we saw an increase of non-resident students and then a corresponding decline. So one area to consider that we might consider advocacy on is giving, again, it's about local control. This committee, future committees could decide that our admissions policy should continue to not admit non-resident students. If there's substantial in-district demand, that could be a decision. But that is no longer a local decision. It's a regulatory decision. So there's some additional talk about advocacy in that area. I'll speak to the other parts of the legislation in just a little bit. So yes, it has been a very productive series of conversations. The part that has not been productive through no fault of our own is the next item on my update, which is we don't have any assessment numbers. We knew this was going to happen, and we're hoping it will be in the last week of February. So whomever I'm speaking to, including Cohasset Advisory later tonight, I will talk about the December PowerPoint presentation, hit some of the highlights, and then say, we'll be back in touch as soon as possible. And while this committee will be asked later in this agenda to certify our fiscal 24 budget, we have to also look at our March meeting at the assessment numbers and give you an opportunity to say whether or not where those numbers fell. That'll be the first opportunity for you as a committee to say, okay, we got the state aid numbers. Where did Chapter 70 fall? Is there a revenue gap, et cetera, et cetera? And we'll come in and make sure that that everyone understands the impacts of these numbers. And of course, we share this information with all of our communities as soon as possible. So the fiscal 24 update is whomever I'm talking to, whether it's select board or advisory, FinCom, we're talking about the regional agreement, updating them on MSBA, and telling them almost not yet with the fiscal 24 budget numbers. Yes, stay tuned, please. The last item I have before going to administrator reports is to just in your packets, I've provided you an update, mid-year update on my goals on cybersecurity training, students passing third-party licensure, us making our way into module 2 of the MSBA core program, and also the development of the procurement manual. I'm pleased with the progress in all of those areas, and we'll report back to you in late spring. Thank you. Yes, Dr. Mussolini. Now, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over for administrator reports.
Let me be very brief. We know that it's not winter out there, but we're already looking ahead to spring. So there are 2 spring things that I wanted to keep everybody in mind. First off, we are bringing out Hall of Fame. This was very helpful. we will be looking at that Hall of Fame. And the other thing we're doing is a night of art, which is also helping with as well, as it happens to be. So that will be a night with our chorus, our actors, our performers, poetry, things like that. The non-athlete side of the building is going to get their time and their share. We're going to dovetail that in with the graphics senior projects, and we're going to have other projects from other shops. We're going to use this whole week to show that off. But that'll be on May 11th. I'll give you more stuff next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You good?
Move on to new business. Right now, we just have, budget certifications. It's going to require a vote. The first item is for certification of the FY '24 budget. Is an entertained motion to certify a proposed FY '24 budget of $15,280,979.
Motion to approve.
Motion Situate, second Abington. We require a vote. Frank from Hanson?
Hanson, yes.
Whitman?
Yes.
Norwell?
Yes.
Cohasset?
Yes.
Situate?
Yes.
Hanover?
Yes.
Abington?
Abington, yes.
And Rockland is a yes. That is a vote. Okay. And now we have,
We take that one out of the agenda. That was for the revised agenda. We just talked about that law.
okay, I'll take that as a case, get that over and just go right down to job descriptions.
We could, if you want to do that, we could do that now and then the job description.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
All right, right now I'm gonna open up the, floor to go back to Dr. Hickey again to talk about job descriptions.
Mr. Chairman, may I discuss the proposed bill?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So-
you can do the bill first and then the job description.
Thank you.
Sorry, my mistake.
No worries. I had submitted to all members of the committee a letter that I had sent to our legislative delegation, HD 485 SD 1697, an act to improve access, opportunity, and capacity in Massachusetts vocational technical education. From time to time, the Mass Association of Vocational Administrators gets sponsors for bills to go to the legislature that advocate on behalf of our school mission and items that are important to us. I wanted to be able to bring this to your attention, especially tonight, because certainly we have, there won't be many meetings in the future where we're not somehow talking about funding. This bill seeks a lot of things, and you know how bills become laws and what percentage of them don't. But I do believe that the timing is right to at least raise the issue. Many of you have said over the years that in your memories of being in this area, how the formation of this school and other schools you're aware of, regionals back decades ago, started with a substantial state investment, that it wasn't entirely on the backs of local taxpayers to form, charter, staff, build the schools that we're in right now. And this bill attempts to do a few things. The most notable thing it does is that it seeks to set up a program that puts $3 billion with a B dollars aside for brick and mortar improvements to regional vocational schools, county agricultural schools, and high schools that have Chapter 74 programs. The ideal funding source for this money is the recently passed Fair Share Amendment. So there's a suggestion, like if you want something and you want to be able to pay for it, where's the potential money coming from? So this bill hopefully will start a conversation and will be assigned to a committee, and we'll be able to work with MAVA to be able to advocate for component parts of it. But if you ask for the headliner of this bill, it's that in order for our schools to be modernized and expanded to meet state demand, capacity must be improved. And we should take on all of the above strategy. We should offer programs at night. We should offer programs to children who don't come here full time. And we should get state funding for equipment, which we've done a very good job of obtaining. But the missing link, especially for a school like ours, over the next few years, is getting direct state funding to help taxpayers in our district offset the cost of a substantial capital project. That's what this bill will attempt to do. There are some other items in this bill that I think are very helpful. One of them includes adding MAVA representation to the MSBA's advisory board. So there's a regional vocational technical voice for their advisory board. It's also looking to create expansion grants subject to appropriation so that if a vocational school's enrollment were to go up by more than a certain percent in a year, that there would be a funding source in order to help the district deal with an increase in enrollment. There's also language looking to try to exempt from the Prop 2.5 levy limit a debt exclusion that might involve our schools like ours. So in other words, we know that there's a levy limit and Prop 2.5 can raise that limit. This language would attempt to say, if there was ever a debt issue that involved the regional vocational schools, that should not have to count against a town's levy limit. That's an interesting concept, because oftentimes, I'm sure you only need to think about your own communities to know that at any given time, someone in the community is advocating for a capital project, educational, first responder, DPW, all of the above. And to think that we would be able to thread the needle and find the right time for all 8, perhaps 9 communities. That's why it's very important that we start communicating early, that we start getting some financial forecasts so that the financial teams at our towns can begin to project. What does this bill do? Well, it might allow a town to, it's one thing to pass the project at the school committee level. It's even another thing to go to the voters and ask them to approve it. But that's not the end of it. While that will be a great day when that happens, each town has to figure out how to pay for it. And most of our communities, I would suspect, would need a debt exclusion in order to pay for it, which is it is not determined by me, this committee, it is determined by the member communities. So if some part of this bill came to light where it allowed a town to not count this against the levy limit, the bottom line is it would be helpful so that the towns are not having to make extremely difficult choices. So for now, it's a concept. We're putting it out there. We're going to try to promote this idea. But again, certainly for me, the headliner is $3 billion. Thank you very much. We'll take a sliver of that, and it'll save our taxpayers some money. Yep. So I'll keep you updated as this gets moved to committee. And thank you for the idea to at least expand on this. Thank you, Tom, for suggesting that we just raised this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will say, this is Tom's bill. I had the privilege of speaking with the executive director, Lava, and he said that Tom wrote this. And so there's no reason why we shouldn't be fighting for it, because it is what it is. And we've always been the second fiddle on the budget vocational wise. And especially nowadays with our high schools on our case, wanting us to go to lottery systems and all that. We need to be on top. We have to have that pool of money at the state level that we can grow it.
I don't know if you've been watching the news, but of late, vocational ed has been tantamount at getting.
Yeah, I know in my town and in Hanson, same thing. Vocational education student enrollment is climbing. And regular education is losing students, right?
Nationwide, it's going up.
Right, so, I understand that, the regular high schools, they still gotta pay the bills regardless if there's 20 kids in a classroom or 10 kids in a classroom. They still need the one teacher, stuff like that, but they need to understand that the money needs to go where the students need to be taught.
The state's economy benefits when it invests in its regionals and its county agriculturals. And if the state's willing to do that, local municipalities don't have to make that tough choice. They still have to keep the lights on at their K-12 schools. They cannot cut a kindergarten teacher in half.
Right.
If there is migration to vocational technical schools and there's direct state aid to help support that, everybody wins.
Right, exactly right.
Just remember what Benjamin Franklin said, he who hath the trade hath the state.
And if you put half in the spell check, back then, that would have come right up.
Exactly. The other thing too is when you go back to your towns, and this comes up to a discussion, that if we do not get this MSBA building that we need to increase our students, and we do take towns coming in, all our students level that it could be an accepted here will be cut down.
That's right, yeah.
You know, you mean the other member towns?
Yeah, our member towns
Yeah,
will
right, they're
start
gonna
losing
lose-
students
Yeah, they're gonna lose
and, again,
Yeah, Tom, it might be a good idea if you said each town what their minimum student count according to the agreement is. Like, we have, I mean, in Whitman, what do we have, 151 students?
Yes, that's correct.
Right, say our minimum is 125. So we're allowing 20, 25, 26 more students because other towns don't need them, so there's open space and we have it according to how our entrance exam, right, how they come in. And we can say to them, look, if we don't do this, guess what? We will not be able to allow any new students in that it's over until we get down to the minimum, right?
I think that's a fair point, then. The timing of our desire perhaps to expand this district and this project, the timing is good.
Yeah.
Because to build a new building and have 4 of our 8 existing communities bear the cost of 80% of what doesn't get reimbursed is rather lopsided.
Right.
Bringing more people to the table and building accordingly, I think like I said, everybody I think will win. But you are right in saying that from the time we bring on another community until the time we have a larger building with more seats, there'll be a few years where those numbers are going to tighten up. And if the project does not pass, then you're absolutely right, Tom. Now you will see a long trend where you might say, I remember when there were 150 kids. And we know that the demand is there. So again, we'll stay tuned on this, but I'll be sure to keep you posted. And thank you, Bob. Steve gives me too much credit for that, for this part, really. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing for that.
Yeah.
And we can just move on with the
Next thing I'll
votes.
do, so, we voted for the budget already, correct? Okay, so now we're gonna move on to Dr. Hickey again for job descriptions.
Thank you. So I'd ask the committee for a vote to approve the job descriptions at 8.1 and 8.2, speech language pathologist and athletic director.
So moved.
I have questions. Has it been seconded yet?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have motion Situate, second Whitman. Discussion?
Yes. I'm against the school committee adopting these. I believe it belongs in the responsibility of the superintendent and principal's office. If we adopt these things, every time Tom wants that person to run to the 50-yard line, for example, instead of 25-yard line, we're going to have to approve it. So I believe it's our job. We authorized the positions. That was our job. And now I strongly believe, and I've been around here a long time, that this is a superintendent and principal's job to put these into action and then have them adopted, period.
Mr. Chairman, Bob, just to respond to that, I agree with the exception of it's the creation of a new position, and that is I believe you have the power. But beyond that, then the rest of what you said falls to me.
Yeah,
That's correct.
we created the position.
That's what this vote tonight would do. It does not give you any management responsibilities, nor does it tie my hands if I need flexibility with with how these descriptions are written.
So what we're voting for is the description and the idea of this, and it's your responsibility to find the right.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes. But, so Bob is correct, but you have the authority to say yes, because you're voting on the budget that will fund these positions.
Okay,
But that is the limit, yes.
so we're not doing the job descriptions.
No. Thank you.
Frank Hanson, do you have anything to say?
Negative, Hanson, but I'm in support of it.
Very good, so we'll be calling for a vote in a second, Frank. Right now, I have a motion and a second. Discussion, anybody else have any more discussion on this matter? Okay, with that being said, I'll ask for a vote. Frank from Hanson?
Hanson, yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Cohasset? Yes. Situate? Gentlemen? Yes. Everything is not going to be yes. Thank you. To the appointment of the MSBA Designer Selection Panel, which is according to where we need to get someone from the school committee. be part of this committee. Situate nominates Bob Haywood, second by Abington. All those in favor of Mr. Haywood being the thing here, so a vote to nominate the second Mr. Haywood to join the MSBA selection committee. Franklin Hanson.
Hanson, yes.
Whitman. Yes. Noel.
Yes.
Yes. Situate. Yes. Hanover. Yes. Abington. Hiram. Rockland is a yes. Thank you very much. That is a vote. We now will turn to donations. Right now, we have a donation coming from Harbor Freight for $200 for the automotive community. And then we also have Snow and Jones donated HVAC boilers, well made 2 boilers for the one plane, which turned out to be close to $5,800 from Snow and Jones. I'll make that motion. Motion Hanover, second Norwell. Frank Hanson.
Hanson, yes.
Whitman, yes. Norwell. Yes. Cohasset.
Yes.
Situate, yes. Hanover, yes. Abington,
Yes.
Rockland. Very much, gentlemen. Now we have the out-of-state field trips. Automotive, we go to New England Dragway, Effingham, New Hampshire, which they have done for years. And also there's an outdoor adventure club, which is whitewater rafting trip, adventure, youth adventures, Terracotta, Maine. Motion Norwell, second Cohasset, by the vote Frank from Hanson.
Hanson, yes.
Whitman?
Yes.
Norwell?
Yes.
Situate? Yes. I think it already is. It already is.
Yeah.
Yes. Hanover, yes. Abington?
Abington, yes.
And Rockland is a yes. Okay, right now we have surplus equipment, 64 standing mixers. Go to surplus.
I'll make that motion.
Motion Whitman, second Norwell. This requires a vote again, Frank from Hanson.
Hanson, yes.
Whitman,
Yes.
Norwell,
Yes.
Cohasset,
Yes.
Situate. Yes. Hanover.
Yes.
Abington.
Yes.
And Rockland is a yes. Any requests for action?
I would like to bring up the subject of buses and bus drivers availability. Saying we opened up the contract because the union was gonna help us get drivers, and it hasn't happened. We haven't paid out any bonuses for drivers, and I would like to have the administration look into the possibility of going to a driver service company and hire a sufficient number of drivers to run our fleet on an outside contract. I'm just asking them to look into it and come back to us.
Okay, I have a question on that. Is that in conflict with any of the contractual issues?
It is not.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll make sure.
There's a process, certainly a lengthy process involved, but there's nothing wrong with doing the research Bob requested.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the
Another
only other thing I want to, go ahead.
question on the buses, the mechanical issues, is that the propanes or the old diesels
The most recent concerns were fuel pumps on I believe two of the propanes, but they're being worked on and brought back. Prior to that, it was the diesels.
The only other thing I'd just like to bring up, was a great article in the paper about culinary, with cooked some meals for the travesty that happened over at the Brockton Hospital with the fire. And they brought meals over for the administration staff that's over there. And I think that was a great thing. And again, that's great publicity that to bring them to our school and our students for what they do here and the staff that helps them. I mean, culinary really this year is stepping up and they're doing a great job. And I just wanted to bring accolades to them as well. So,
Good job.
anybody else have anything to do under request for action? With that being said, I will turn to our colleague from Whitman.
I'm motion to adjourn with all due respect.
Motion, second by Hanover. Frank from Hanson,
Hanson, yes.
Yes.
Yes. Really very much for this. Thank you for attending and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you very much. We have adjourned.